Okay, it is Monday, 7 p.m. I had a very long day at work. I am exhausted. I just shoved food in my face for some dinner, and I'm going back to the bookstore. This is like the third bookstore trip in 3 weeks. I swear I don't have a problem. Going to a bookstore is never a problem. But my dad called and was like, "Hey, do you want to go to a bookstore?" And I'm like, "Of course, but why?" And he needs something for an art piece for one of his jobs. And I was like, "Yep. Thank you for inviting me. Let's go book shopping again." Can we talk about how David Tennant is an actual Time Lord? Best book ever. Welcome back, everybody. It is Tuesday morning around 8:30. My computer is restarting for the last few minutes, so we'll see if I broke it. I started a new book and I kind of wanted to talk about it just a little bit. I am a few chapters in, and it is called Of Women and Salt by Gabriela Garcia. I did not pick the correct book. I saw a deal come through on Chirp, and so I was like, oh, it's Gabriela Garcia. Awesome. Okay, I want that book. Completely missed the fact that it was Gabriela Garcia and not Gabriel Garcia Marquez. So I picked the wrong author and had no idea what the book was, and I just picked it because of the author, and I was like, okay. About 2 or 3 chapters in, I don't remember how, but I realized, oh, that's not who I thought it was, which is totally fine. So the story is of present day Miami, and the woman's name is Jeanette, and she is the daughter of a Cuban immigrant, and she is battling addiction, and she is working to get sober and to stay sober. And she has apparently a very troubled relationship with her mother, and she and her mother make a decision to go to Cuba and to start to dig into their history. And the story flashes back between Jeanette in present day and Maria in 19th century Cuba, where she is the only woman in a cigar rolling factory. Part of the reason that she loved working in the cigar factory was because of the lector, which was a job of somebody to read to the cigar rollers. It was intended to help educate them, keep them up on the news, to help shape the communities that they were in. And the lector actually had quite a lot of power, especially if they were able to choose their own reading material, which they weren't always. But in this particular story, the lector chooses just incredible works of art to read. He would read poetry. He would read. It starts out saying that he was reading Victor Hugo, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and then Les Miserables is the current book that they were on as the story takes place. Alexandre Dumas with The Count of Monte Cristo, my all-time favorite book, and the works of William Shakespeare. And one of the favorites of the cigar rollers is Romeo and Juliet. And so she loves to hear and listen to these works being read, but as revolution comes through Cuba, again, it's war falling on people's doorsteps that have no interest in it or no part in it. And suddenly the lector's news articles that he reads become more and more censored by his boss, who is worried about drawing attention to his factory because he doesn't want a revolution incited from the liberty-minded people, which they are, gaining the idea of liberty through the news and through these works of fiction that inspire them. It's now flashing back and forth between the two time periods. I'm only a little bit of the way in through it, but so far I'm quite enjoying it. I'm actually enjoying the parts of the story more that take place in 19th century Cuba following Maria. But I'm sure that the stories are going to both be very, very interesting. And so far I'm liking the style of writing from Gabriela. And I will give you guys an update as I get more into the book. Okay, so I just finished Of Women in Salt. I'm gonna collect myself and try to put some thoughts together, but oh man, this book is kind of raw, and man, it hits hard in certain parts. Are gonna hit different people different ways, but whew. Okay, let me try to describe this book. So, Of Women in Salt by Gabriela Garcia is the not only multi-generational story, but just multi-immigrant woman story from like 4 different people, maybe 5 different people. Okay, so I gave it like a high 3.5, 3.75, maybe even 4 stars. The only thing that actually holds me back from giving it a really, really high rating is because there were so many stories, it was kind of hard to follow along. Now, part of this could be my own fault though, because I listened to this on audiobook, and without seeing the chapter and section beginnings that tell you who you're following and in what year you're following, it was a lot harder to track. So that could be an issue with the just having it via an audiobook versus physical book. So I don't want to like dock too much, because it was very, very well written. Even covering all the different points of view through the different points in time. And the audiobook was honestly amazing. The narrator was, oh my God, the entire novel is told with a beautifully authentic Hispanic accent. And I don't want to necessarily say Spanish specifically, because I have not looked up the narrator, so I don't know if she's Spanish, I don't know if she's Mexican, I don't know if she's Cuban, I don't know if she's Guatemalan, but she had a just wonderfully authentic accent. And when she was voicing different characters who weren't necessarily Latinx, then it became more Americanized. And it was just, she did such an amazing job to hear the Spanish words said correctly and authentically. Made it such an immersive experience. So the audiobook's absolutely phenomenal. I would highly recommend reading that one. But the downside is that it can be a little bit hard to follow which story you're following at the point. Now, to get to the story, I had to flip the camera because my arm's getting really tired. This is the story of women and their salt. The salt being of their bodies, whether it be the sweat of their brow or the tears. And I loved the imagery and the comparison. And so it follows mostly one specific family line, and it's through the mothers and daughters and granddaughters on and on and on, their perspective and their stories. It covers so many really difficult topics, but I feel like it does so incredibly expertly. It talks about alcohol addiction, it talks about drug addiction, opioid, heroin, coke, so many different things, and how you feel struggling with addiction, and how your friends and family are feeling with loving somebody struggling with addiction. It talks about immigration, it talks about deportation, it talks about racism, specifically racism in the Cuban community with the Afro-Cuban community, and how many Cubans are black, and how discriminated they are by the lighter skinned Cubans, and how in Florida, specifically in Miami, Those second, third generation Cuban immigrants don't necessarily realize that, or at least it's the more, as it says, polite racism that are the microaggressions. They're not the outright discriminations that you would see in Cuba. And it talks about, you know, children crossing the border alone, children being, their parents being deported or picked up by ICE and they're just left behind. It talks about women getting into the workforce in like the 19th century in the cigar rolling factory where there were no women, the fact that women were working at all. It talks about spousal abuse, it talks about physical abuse and sexual abuse and the violence perpetrated on women, and then the excuses that women make to themselves and to their children while enduring that violence. It talks about mothers and daughters and how they don't talk about their traumas, thinking that if I don't bring the past into the present, then it can't hurt me anymore. But the silence is its own trauma. But it does all of this. It does all of this without judgment. I am astonished at how it is simply telling people's stories, but it is not judging and condemning them for the choices that they've made, because who are we to condemn somebody for what they had to do to survive? It basically is laying out real, visceral imagery and stories that every single woman can relate to in some way or another, whether you are an immigrant or of an immigrant family or not, whether you are Latinx or not, whether you are struggling with addiction or not, whether you have somebody very close to you struggling with addiction or not, whether you have been a victim directly of violence or not. It does such an amazing job. Okay, you know what? Yeah, I'm gonna have to give this book 4 stars, minimum. It does such an amazing job of making you see and feel and understand and then grapple with your own feelings, because the book is not going to do the work for you. It is not going to tell you how you should feel about something. It is simply going to tell you this is what exists. This is what people deal with. These are the situations that they find themselves in. Mothers doing anything and everything they have to protect their children. How do you feel about this? How does this make your heart pound? How does this make your brain whirl with what would I do in that situation? Because it's not about do you condemn or not condemn, do you approve or not approve of this other person. By not giving you any commentary, it makes you think, what would I do? Who would I be? Of what salt am I made? I picked up this book accidentally, and I am so glad I did. I was just watching a booktuber doing a review on like 2019 or 2020 or 2021, their favorite books, and I don't remember which one it was, but it was Bow Ties and Books with Jesse. And they were saying that, like, do you know how sometimes a book comes into your life and you don't know why? And maybe it's a book that you wouldn't even typically read, but it comes into your life when you need it. And I feel like that this book was one of those books for me. It was stunning. It was absolutely stunning. Highly encourage anybody to read this book. I'm still processing it, but I am so grateful for this book. I am so grateful for the experiences that it talks about unflinchingly. Difficult conversations, so many facets of it mirror either my own experiences as the person in those shoes or being a very close loved one of somebody in those shoes. And so it was visceral. So I didn't have the triggers that maybe other people will have. I will say, if you want to read this and you have experienced any of the things that I've mentioned, please check the trigger warnings and be mindful of this as the story goes on, because it is intense. It is very, very intense. And like I said, it's unflinching. But I think it is so absolutely worthwhile. I actually wrote a review for this because I couldn't not. That's so uncommon for me. But yeah, Gabriela Garcia of Women in Salt, check it out. So while my work computer restarts first thing in the morning, I have an update. I was gonna make this last night, but I had absolutely no emotional capacity to do so. I left work yesterday after avoiding like 3 separate times of breaking down and crying. Managed to get through the end of the day, and I thought, okay, I did it. I got through the day. I was busy and overwhelmed and stressed, but I didn't break down. Gonna go home, gonna relax. 2 minutes after I left my parking lot at the office, I got pulled over. I felt like I was having a blood sugar crash, actually, as I was leaving the building. I am hypoglycemic. I am not diabetic, but my hypoglycemia could lead to diabetes because my pancreas keeps putting out too much insulin into my body, which is causing sugar drops, which is causing havoc with my pancreas. So I got that going for me. So yeah, I felt like I was having a sugar crash actually by the time I got into my car. Head to toe, I was feeling feverish and prickly and lightheaded. And I was like, I gotta get home. So yeah, 2 minutes after I left the parking lot, I got pulled over. The cop came to the car and said, "You blew through that stop sign." I'm like, I genuinely don't remember interacting with a stop sign. Like, I knew what he was talking about. I knew where he meant. I didn't remember how I proceeded through it, I guess is the best way. It's not like I completely blacked out and forgot that I drove to that section of the road, but I just genuinely did not remember what happened at the stop sign. So I kind of stared at him for a minute and it was like, I mean, you were there. I guess I did. I'm like, blew through it though? I'm gonna lean on the desk because my arm hurts. Here's the thing. It was not an intersection stop sign. This was a turnaround stop sign. And if you are unfamiliar with Michigan, when you need to make a U-turn or make a left turn on a multi-lane road, there's usually not a center lane that you can do that in. Usually the middle lane is concrete medians with berms that have grass and bushes and trees and everything. And every quarter mile, half mile, sometimes mile, depending on how far out you are, that berm shrinks down a little bit so that it adds a left turn lane. And then you go into it and you literally come down in a J, capital J shape, and you can either turn left then into businesses, down other streets, or you can literally make a U-turn and go in the opposite direction. I understand that there are stop signs and the definition of a stop sign is a stop sign. However, they're also called Michigan lefts. These are treated by 99.9% of Michigan drivers and cops as yields or flashing reds, because a lot of times you're making a left or a U-turn onto an absolutely dead road, no oncoming traffic. Now, sometimes they're very, very busy areas, which is why they were built. They were built as a safety feature to make a protected left turn or U-turn area for drivers. I also did not know until I was an adult, these are a Michigan thing. I went to another state or two and I didn't see any of them. And I asked and they were like, that's not a thing here. That's weird. I love them. I think they are protective of drivers and I appreciate them. I can see myself going through one, slowing down, but not coming to a complete stop if there's like a wave of traffic coming, but it's a distance enough away that I can safely make the turn, but that would lock me in there for another 10 minutes if I wait until the wave comes. So the only thing there was oncoming traffic from the other direction. The thing right across was a cemetery. You know what dead people don't do is drive. So it was not as though I was being unsafe, and had I been blowing through a stop sign at an intersection, absolutely, that's not okay. Even if there's no one there, it's not okay. The Michigan lefts are basically yield and flashing red in how they're treated by every driver. So I was frustrated because, again, my blood sugar was dropping and I was feeling shaky by this point, and I was now at the end of an emotional day being pulled over, couldn't find my registration for my new car that I got a few months ago. That's not causing any panic. Finally, the cop gave up on waiting for me because he was so impatient, which, okay. Took my license and my proof of insurance And I then finally found my registration. And the thing is, I didn't want to go digging around too far because I don't want a cop seeing me digging around where he can't see my hands, where he can't see where I am and what I'm doing. And my car has this terrible design where there is a drawer under the passenger seat. And also, to anybody who out there who has a car with this design, please, please, please do not put any of your important paperwork in the drawer under the passenger seat. You do not want to reach under the seat when a cop pulls you over and asks for your license, registration, and proof of insurance. So please, for the love of goodness, do not do that. I couldn't find my registration, and I thought to myself, there's no way I put it under the seat. There's no way. Because this was the exact scenario I did not want happening. Took everything out of my glove box again, nearly shoved my head in my glove box, finally found it. It had like plastered itself to the side of the glove box. So finally he came back to the car and I was like, I found my registration, and I showed it to him and he's like, okay, here's your ticket. I'm like, all right, I understand. I'm not mad at the guy. He's doing his job. He's probably right. I don't remember. But he's probably right. And I deserved a ticket. I'm not going to complain. I'm not going to berate him or anything. In the city that I got it, they don't put any information on the ticket about how much the fine is or how many points on your license it is. So I Googled it. And if Google is correct, which it usually is, it is $157 for the ticket, which, okay, that's a hit. But you know what? It's my own fault. It is 3 points. That is more than had I been speeding 25 miles over the speed limit, possibly even up to like 50 miles over the speed limit. I'm like, are you kidding me? Again, had I blown through at an intersection where there was actually dangerous scenarios that could have happened, I would understand. For not coming to a complete stop at a left turn, 3 points, which I know can jack up my insurance, which from Google's masterful mind, it can jack up my insurance anywhere between 30% to 80%. That's a great spread. And my insurance. The reason I'm so freaked out about this is because in Michigan, we had no fault insurance, meaning we had the highest insurance rates in the country. People would hear Michigan insurance rates and they would like drop whatever was in their hands. I have heard stories that people in other states were fully insured for like $90 a month. And I'm like, I pay over $300. What? So they got rid of no fault, which has its downsides. I'm not going to say that I'm a proponent of one way or another. It is what it is. It has its downsides, but it also has its upside that was supposed to be people across Michigan, their insurance was going to drop. Mine went up $60 a month when no fault went away. And I live in a zip code that is not considered the city that it actually is. It's considered the city next to it, which has the highest rates in the state. So we have to constantly fight with our insurance companies that they're coding us improperly, and they're like, well, your zip code's in. I'm like, no, it's look at the name of the city, look at a map, look at the US Post Office, look at anything and figure out I don't live in the city next to me, I live in the city that I live in. So I already have ridiculously high insurance, and if it goes up again because of these points, so remember that emotional breakdown I mentioned that I almost had 3 times yesterday? Got the ticket, pulled over separately onto a safe area and started looking up information on the ticket, and then lost my mind. Complete meltdown. I was like a 4-year-old who had scraped their knee at the playground. I couldn't catch my breath. I could barely talk. And all I could think to do was I called my mom, because what do you do when you're 4 and you scrape up your leg at a playground? You go see your mom. I needed somebody to talk me off this ledge, and who better than your mom to do that? And thankfully she did and helped me. And it's not that I didn't have perspective. It's just that it was a culmination of a very long building need to break down. And I'm apparently going to do it again today. Great. So she calmed me down enough that I could get to the gas station, because that's why I was headed in that direction in the first place, was I needed to go get gas. And then on my way home, I did the only logical thing, and I bought Taco Bell for dinner and then sat on my bed in my underwear eating my weight in Taco Bell. So that was my day yesterday. And then this morning, before I pulled out of the driveway, I got a text from my coworker that said, just don't come in. So I called and I'm like, what is going on? Everything's down. Everything is down. There's nothing my team can do about it, except my team has to take all the phone calls from everybody complaining that everything is down. Waiting for my computer to restart because apparently it wants to apply updates, which gotta love. Thank you, Windows. That's exactly what I needed today. So I don't think today's gonna be a good day, but you know what? I'm not gonna try to remain positive. That's not my thing. It's never been my thing. I'm a cynic. The glass, is it half full or is it half empty? I don't care because it doesn't have anything in it that I care about. And it's an ugly glass is how I've always looked at it. So I'm going to try to not have a meltdown today. And that's really going to be how I grade today as a success or not, is if I just manage to not have an absolute mental breakdown again at the office. That's it. That's all I got for now. Okay, bye.
1 hour later.
I also forgot to mention that today my dad is having ear cancer removal surgery. So it's the Mohs, M-O-H-S. If you're curious, look up more information. But basically, you can, and my grandfather, my mom's dad had this as well. So like on your ear, my dad's is like right here. On my grandfather, it was right at the top of his ear. You can get something that kind of feels like a pimple or a spot of some kind, and it turns out to be cancerous. Very slow growing, not very dangerous. And what they do, there's a few different surgeries and treatments that you can do. The one that I am familiar with is what my grandpa had and what my dad is having, which is they will anesthetize the area. I don't know if they freeze it, but they will at least anesthetize the area. And then they begin shaving off the layers of skin, microns, like tiny, thin layers. And they do it and do it and do it. And then they're putting them under the microscope to find out if there are cancerous cells in them. And they continue to do this for hours until they get down to a few layers of skin that have no cancerous cells present. And then bandage it, obviously keep the bandaged area clean, clear of infection. I think it's like a special prescription ointment that you put on it. And then you have a dent in your ear. You know, my grandpa was like in his 90s at that point. And he's like, I'm not vain. I don't care. I don't know what it's going to look like on my dad's ear. Because it's in such a weird spot, which is like right in the curve of the ear, like right in here. I think if it's like really bad, they can do like a reconstructive surgery. He's probably not going to care. So he's been in for an hour. They basically say like, bring a book, bring your phone where you can read, watch movies, stream, whatever, because you're going to be there for hours because it's a very long process. One layer at a time under a microscope, one layer at a time under a microscope. So not scary. He's by himself. He doesn't need to, have a ride or anything. And because it does take so unbelievably long, they recommend you don't bring people if you don't have to. So yeah, that's going on today, which I'm glad about because apparently it's been very painful for my dad and has been desperate to get it. They were first going to do it like early November and he's like, please, if you have a cancellation, if you have anything, get me in sooner. They were able to get him in today, which is the 13th of October. So that's good. So that's a good thing, but a little bit of a nerve-wracking thing to, find out you have some form of cancer, but it could have been a million times worse. We're grateful that it was what it was. Get yourself checked. If something seems weird, get yourself checked. Be your own advocate. Don't let things go if you feel that they're not right. Please be your own advocate. And if you need help being an advocate for yourself, bring somebody with you to help advocate for you. That's my PSA for today. my boss asked if there's anything she could get me because she was just done for the day and was gonna go to Starbucks like an hour before quitting time. My absolute favorite, really the only thing I can even tolerate from Starbucks anymore, their green tea frappuccino. It tastes like grass and it is the best thing on the planet. I love this. Locked myself out of my office. Got my flu shot. Of course, being the dummy that I was, I made an appointment at one pharmacy and then went to a different pharmacy closer to work thinking that's where I made my appointment for, and then had to go to the right pharmacy. So that happened. But at least I got my flu shot, and then in about a week, I'm gonna get my COVID booster. Get vaccinated. Hey everyone, I am gonna end the vlog here. It is Saturday night. I came home from grocery shopping and found that the water heater is broken. Pilot went out and it will not restart. I had an exhausting week, physically, emotionally, financially, and then this happened. I'm just gonna go to bed and hope things start to get better. So that's it. That's all I got. Be kind to each other. Be safe. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you in the next one.